Karen had always been the type of person who believed the world owed her something. Growing up, she demanded the latest gadgets, designer clothes, and lavish vacations, throwing tantrums whenever her parents refused. Now in her 30s, that sense of entitlement had only intensified. So when Karen sauntered into the local pet shop one sunny afternoon, she fully expected to get her way. Scanning the rows of cages, her eyes landed on the most adorable tabby kitten, its piercing green eyes and soft, fluffy fur practically beckoning her to take it home. "Excuse me, I want that one," she said, gesturing towards the kitten's enclosure. The employee behind the counter, a kind-looking young woman named Tiffany, gave her an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but that kitten was already claimed by another customer. We have plenty of other wonderful cats available if you'd like to take a look." Karen's brow furrowed in frustration. "What do you mean, already claimed? I saw it first, so it's mine." Tiffany tried to explain the adoption process, but Karen wasn't having it. No, no, no. This is ridiculous. I want that cat, and I want it now." She slammed her palm on the counter, causing Tiffany to flinch. Just then, the bell on the door jingled as an elderly couple walked in, heading straight for the kitten's cage. "Oh, there's our little Mittens," the woman cooed, reaching in to gently stroke the cat's head. Karen watched the scene with growing rage. "Excuse me, but I was here first. That cat is mine." The older man turned to her, brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, dear. We put a deposit down on this kitten yesterday." "I don't care. I saw it first, so it belongs to me." Karen's voice rose to an angry shriek, drawing the attention of the other customers. Tiffany tried to defuse the situation. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but we have a first-come, first-served policy here. This kitten has already been adopted." Karen's eyes narrowed dangerously. "We'll see about that." In one swift motion, she reached into the cage, snatched the terrified kitten, and bolted out the door, the poor cat mewing in distress. The elderly couple and Tiffany stood in stunned silence for a moment before springing into action. "Someone call the police," Tiffany shouted, already dialing 911 on her cell phone. As Karen sprinted down the street, the kitten struggling in her arms, she couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of triumph. That's right, it's mine now. No one's going to take what's mine. Little did she know, her impulsive actions were about to land her in a world of trouble. Karen's heart pounded as she raced down the street, the terrified kitten squirming in her arms. She couldn't believe she'd just stolen the cat right from under the elderly couple's noses. But in her mind, it was rightfully hers. She had seen it first, and that was all that mattered. As she rounded the corner, Karen glanced behind her to see if anyone was in pursuit. To her relief, the pet shop was nowhere to be seen. But her moment of triumph was short-lived as the kitten let out a pitiful meow, clawing at her arms. "Sha, it's okay, little one," she cooed, though the cat's distress only seemed to intensify. "I'm taking you home now, where you belong." Karen quickened her pace, desperate to put as much distance between herself and the pet shop as possible. She knew the police would be called, and she couldn't afford the consequences of her impulsive actions. Her mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. Finally, she spotted a seedy-looking alleyway and ducked inside, hoping to lose any potential followers. The alley was dark and reeked of garbage, but Karen pressed on, clutching the kitten tightly. She could feel the poor thing trembling in her arms, and a pang of guilt momentarily tugged at her conscience. "Don't worry, you're safe with me," she lied, trying to convince both the cat and herself. As she reached the end of the alley, Karen paused, her eyes darting around for a place to hide. Her gaze settled on a dumpster, and without hesitation, she lifted the lid and shoved the kitten inside, ignoring its pitiful cries. "I'm sorry, but I can't have you giving away my location," she whispered, slamming the lid shut and hoping the poor creature would be safe, at least for the time being. Karen pressed her back against the dumpster, heart pounding as she strained to hear any signs of pursuit. The only sounds were the faint meows of the kitten and the distant hum of traffic. Slowly, she began to relax, a twisted sense of relief washing over her. "See, I told you it would be fine," she murmured, though the kitten's cries only served to make her feel uneasy. Pushing the thought aside, Karen took a deep breath and began to plan her next move, determined to evade capture at all costs. As the kitten's muffled cries echoed from the dumpster, Karen felt a pang of guilt gnaw at her conscience. The poor thing was terrified, and she couldn't help but wonder if she had gone too far. But the fear of being caught quickly overshadowed any remorse she felt. Squaring her shoulders, Karen peered cautiously out of the alley, scanning the street for any sign of pursuit. The pet shop was nowhere to be seen, and the road seemed eerily quiet. She let out a shaky breath, her racing heart beginning to slow. "Okay, you're in the clear, Karen," she murmured to herself. "Now, you just need to figure out what to do with this cat." The kitten's pitiful meows tugged at her heart, and she found herself hesitating. Maybe she could just take it home, keep it hidden, and no one would be the wiser. After all, it was just a harmless little cat, and it had chosen her, right? But then the image of the elderly couple's devastated faces flashed through her mind, and she knew she couldn't keep the kitten. The guilt was too much to bear. Karen groaned in frustration, running a hand through her hair. "What am I going to do?" she muttered, her gaze settling on the dumpster once more. The kitten had fallen silent, and a wave of panic washed over her. "No, no, no, you can't be dead," she cried, yanking open the lid. To her relief, the kitten was still alive, though it looked frighteningly weak. Overcome with a surge of protectiveness, Karen carefully lifted the tiny creature, cradling it against her chest. "I'm so sorry, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen." Karen glanced around the alley, her mind racing. She couldn't just let the kitten die, but she also couldn't risk keeping it. Suddenly, an idea struck her, and she hurried towards the street, the kitten mewing pitifully in her arms. As she emerged from the alley, Karen's eyes landed on a Greyhound bus stop a few blocks away. Perfect. She could simply leave the kitten there, and someone would find it and take it to the shelter. With a renewed sense of purpose, she quickened her pace, determined to make things right. But as she approached the bus stop, her steps faltered. The kitten was looking up at her with those big, trusting eyes, and Karen felt her resolve crumbling. Could she really just abandon it? As Karen stood at the Greyhound bus stop, the kitten's plaintive meows tugging at her heart, she found herself torn. On one hand, she knew she had to get rid of the cat to avoid the consequences of her impulsive actions. But on the other, she couldn't bring herself to simply abandon the helpless creature. The kitten snuggled into the crook of her arm, its soft fur brushing against her skin. Karen looked down at it, her resolve wavering. She had always been a dog person, never really understanding the appeal of cats. But there was something about this tiny, vulnerable kitten that had managed to tug at her heartstrings. "What am I going to do with you?" she murmured, gently stroking the kitten's head. It responded with a soft purr, its eyes gazing up at her with trust and affection. Karen glanced around nervously, half expecting to see flashing police lights at any moment. The street was still eerily quiet, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the authorities caught up with her. She had to make a decision, and fast. Suddenly, an idea struck her. She could take the kitten home, at least temporarily, and figure out a plan from there. Maybe she could find it a good home, one where it would be safe and loved. The guilt of stealing it would still weigh heavily on her, but at least the poor thing wouldn't be left to fend for itself on the street. Steeling her resolve, Karen tucked the kitten securely into her jacket and hurried away from the bus stop. As she walked, the kitten's soft purrs filled the silence, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "I'm going to take care of you. We'll figure this out, I promise." But even as the words left her lips, Karen couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, and the consequences of her actions were beginning to dawn on her. Still, she couldn't bring herself to abandon the kitten, not when it was depending on her. As Karen rounded the corner and approached her apartment, she took a deep breath, bracing herself for the challenges that lay ahead. She knew that keeping the kitten was a risk, but in that moment, she couldn't bring herself to let it go. For better or worse, she was in this mess together with the tiny feline, and she was determined to see it through. As Karen hurried up the steps to her apartment, the kitten nestled safely in her jacket. She couldn't help but feel a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew what she had done was wrong, but the thought of abandoning the tiny creature was almost unbearable. Reaching her door, Karen quickly ushered the kitten inside, shutting and locking it behind her. She leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath as she surveyed her small living room. "Okay, little one, welcome to your new home," she murmured, carefully extracting the kitten from her jacket. The cat blinked up at her, its green eyes filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Karen couldn't help but smile as she watched the kitten take in its surroundings. "Don't worry, I'm going to take good care of you. No one's going to hurt you here." Setting the kitten down on the floor, Karen quickly rummaged through her cabinets, gathering a few makeshift supplies. She found an old shoebox and lined it with a soft towel, creating a cozy little bed. Grabbing a saucer, she filled it with water and placed it next to the box. "There, that should do for now," she said, gently scooping up the kitten and setting it in the box. The cat meowed softly, then began to groom itself, much to Karen's delight. As she watched the kitten settle in, Karen felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had made the impulsive decision to keep the cat, and now she was determined to make it work. But the nagging guilt in the back of her mind wouldn't go away. "I'm so sorry for what I did," she whispered, reaching out to stroke the kitten's soft fur. "But I promised I'll make it up to you. You're safe here, and I'll make sure you're taken care of." Karen knew that she couldn't keep the kitten forever, not with the threat of the police looming. But for now, she was determined to give the tiny creature the love and attention it deserved. She would figure out a plan, but for the moment, she was content to simply bask in the kitten's presence. As the cat curled up and drifted off to sleep, Karen felt a sense of calm wash over her. Maybe, just maybe, she could make this work. She just had to be careful and keep the kitten hidden from prying eyes. With a renewed sense of purpose, Karen settled onto the couch, her eyes fixed on the sleeping kitten. She may have made a mistake, but she was going to do everything in her power to make things right. Karen spent the next few days in a constant state of anxiety, her every waking moment consumed by the fear of being caught. She kept the kitten hidden in her apartment, sneaking it scraps of food and making sure it had everything it needed. But the guilt of her actions weighed heavily on her. As the days passed, Karen became increasingly paranoid, jumping at every sound and avoiding eye contact with her neighbors. She knew it was only a matter of time before the authorities tracked her down, and the thought of facing the consequences of her impulsive decision filled her with dread. One night, as Karen was settling in for bed, a sudden noise from the living room caught her attention. Her heart pounding, she crept towards the doorway, peering cautiously into the dimly lit room. To her horror, a shadowy figure stood in the center of the room, silhouetted against the moonlight streaming through the window. Karen's breath caught in her throat as she realized it was a police officer, his uniform clearly visible. "Oh God," she whispered, her mind racing. Panic seized her as she considered her options. Should she try to reason with the officer? Or should she attempt to flee, risking even greater consequences? Before she could decide, the officer turned towards her, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the television. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief as she recognized the familiar features of her neighbor, Mr. Hendricks. "Karen?" he said, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I was just checking on your cat." Karen let out a shaky breath, her heart still pounding. "Mr. Hendricks, What are you doing here?" The older man offered her a sheepish smile. "Well, I heard some rather distressed mewing coming from your apartment earlier, and I wanted to make sure everything was all right. I know how much you love animals, so I just wanted to make sure your new pet was settling in okay." Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her, quickly replaced by a sense of guilt. "Oh, yes, the cat is doing fine. Thank you for checking on it." Mr. Hendricks nodded, his gaze softening. "I'm glad to hear that. You know, if you ever need any help caring for it, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to lend a hand." Karen felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, the weight of her deception pressing down on her. "I appreciate that, Mr. Hendricks. I'll keep it in mind." As the older man turned to leave, Karen bit her lip, her conscience nagging at her. "Mr. Hendricks, wait," she called out, her voice trembling. He paused, looking back at her with a curious expression. "Yes, Karen?" Taking a deep breath, Karen steeled herself. I have something to tell you." Karen's heart pounded as she faced her elderly neighbor, Mr. Hendricks, the guilt of her actions weighing heavily on her. She had to come clean, but the fear of the consequences was paralyzing. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to meet his kind, understanding gaze. "Mr. Hendricks, I have something to tell you, and I need you to promise you won't tell anyone." The older man's brow furrowed with concern. "Karen, what is it? What's wrong?" Karen felt her resolve wavering, but she knew she had to be honest. "The cat. I didn't actually adopt it. I stole it from the pet shop." Mr. Hendricks' eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft purring of the kitten from its makeshift bed. Karen braced herself for his inevitable outrage, but to her surprise, his expression softened. "Oh, Karen," he sighed, shaking his head. "I had a feeling something like this might have happened." Karen stared at him, speechless. You did." He nodded solemnly. "I've known you for a long time, dear, and I've seen the way you sometimes struggle with impulse control. When I heard the commotion at the pet shop, I had a feeling you might have been involved." Tears welled up in Karen's eyes as shame and remorse washed over her. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hendricks. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I saw the kitten and I wanted it, and I couldn't stand the thought of someone else taking it." Mr. Hendricks stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I understand, Karen, but you know what you did was wrong, don't you?" Karen nodded, her chin trembling. "Yes, I do, and I'm ready to face the consequences. I'll turn myself into the police, I promise." The older man's expression softened. "That's very brave of you, Karen. But before you do that, I think we should figure out what's best for the kitten." Karen's eyes widened. "You mean you're not going to turn me in?" Mr. Hendricks shook his head. "No, my dear. I know you made a mistake, but I also know you have a good heart. And this poor little creature doesn't deserve to be punished for your actions." Karen felt a surge of relief and gratitude, the weight on her shoulders suddenly lifting. "Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." As the two of them set out to find a suitable home for the kitten, Karen couldn't help but feel a newfound sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could still redeem herself and make amends for her impulsive decision. After her heartfelt confession to Mr. Hendricks, Karen knew she had to make things right. With his guidance and support, she set out to find a loving home for the kitten she had so impulsively stolen. The first step was returning to the pet shop, where Tiffany and the elderly couple were overjoyed to be reunited with the missing cat. Karen braced herself for their anger, but to her surprise, they were more relieved than anything else. "We're just glad the poor thing is safe," the kind woman said, gently cradling the kitten in her arms. Karen felt a pang of guilt, but also a newfound respect for the couple's compassion. Tiffany, the employee Karen had so rudely confronted, even offered her a sympathetic smile. "I'm glad you brought the kitten back. We know you must have been going through something difficult. Karen nodded, her eyes downcast. I'm so sorry for what I did. I never meant to cause so much trouble. I wanted the cat so badly, and I didn't think about the consequences. Tiffany placed a gentle hand on her arm. I understand. But I hope you've learned that your actions have real consequences, not just for you, but for others as well. Karen swallowed hard, her resolve strengthening. I have, and I'm ready to face them. True to her word, Karen turned herself into the police, fully prepared to accept the legal ramifications of her theft. But to her surprise, the officers were understanding, recognizing the genuine remorse in her eyes. After a stern warning and a promise to complete community service, Karen was released, her criminal record remaining clean. As she left the police station, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a newfound sense of purpose filling her. In the weeks that followed, Karen threw herself into her community service, volunteering at the local animal shelter and learning the importance of empathy and kindness. She even adopted a rescue dog, determined to give a loving home to an animal in need. Whenever she visited the pet shop, Tiffany and the elderly couple greeted her warmly, their initial distrust replaced by an appreciation for her efforts to make amends. And whenever Karen saw the tabby kitten, now happily settled in its new home, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude. The experience had been a harsh lesson, but one that Karen knew she needed. She had learned the hard way that the world did not, in fact, owe her anything. And in the end, the true reward was not getting what she wanted, but becoming a better person in the process.